Hi, and welcome back to MyExcelOnline.com. Today we have a beginner's guide to using Microsoft Access for you. If you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel and Office, join our Academy online course and access more than 1,000 video training tutorials so that you can advance your level and get the promotions, pay raises, or new jobs. The link to join our Academy online course is in the description. What is Microsoft Access? Well, Microsoft Access is what's known as a relational database. So the key word in this is relational. It means that there is data inside of your database that relates to other data inside of your database. I think this can best be explained by looking at two separate spreadsheets. So I've created two spreadsheets right here in Excel. The first spreadsheet is a list of my manufacturers and all of their contact information. My second spreadsheet is a list of my parts and the manufacturer that makes these parts. So if you look closely at column C, you can see that the manufacturers listed here are the same manufacturers that are listed right here on the manufacturers tab in column A. So in Excel, I can do all these things like VLOOKUPs or XLOOKUPs, and I can get the data out that I need. But the strength of Microsoft Access is this very thing, relating together data that is similar in two or more places. So let's see how we get started in Microsoft Access. If I have Microsoft Office installed on my computer, I just need to go down here and type in Access, and I should be able to find the link for the application. So I'm just going to click on this, and Microsoft Access will open up. Like in all Microsoft products, there are templates that you can use. So if I were to go on to the New tab right here, I would see a list of different kinds of templates of databases that I can use to begin my project, and then I can build off of that. But for the sake of our tutorial, I'm going to go to a blank database. Now on the screen, you can see that this is being stored on my OneDrive, and maybe I don't want that stored on my OneDrive. So for now, I'm going to click on this button right here, and this is going to bring me to my File Explorer. So I would like to store that right here, and instead of calling this database 4, I would just like to name this database parts. And I'd like for you to look here. You can see the extension on a Microsoft Access file is ACCDB. That is true for any Microsoft Access file from 2007 to 2016. But if I go down here, I can see that there are previous versions that end with a .mdb. So just keep that in mind in case you're working with older Access files. ACCDB is more current, MDB is more the old school databases. So I'm just going to hit OK, and you can now see that my database will be saved in that chosen location, and I'm just going to hit Create. So Microsoft Access, like every other product, has a lot of ribbons up here, and hopefully we'll go through most of these options for you eventually. But for today, we're just trying to give a really quick overview. So the first thing that happens when you open up a new Microsoft Access database is you're presented with the option for a table. Microsoft Access is not really going to do anything unless it has a table. So I want you to think of a table as a single spreadsheet. So if I go back to Excel and I look at my manufacturers, I have some column headers at the top, and then I have data in these rows right here. So I'm just going to transpose everything I have here in Excel into a table in Access. So if I go back to Access, I can click right up here in this yellow area, and I will be prompted for a data type. So let's look back to Excel for a minute. I can see that I have typed in text here, text here, text here, and in fact I've typed in text for most of my fields. You can make the argument that a zip code is a number, but sometimes it has a dash in it. So in Access, the dash is seen as text and not as a number. Same for the phone number over here. We have a period between the area code and the phone number and the last 4 digits of the number. So the best data type for each of these fields in Access is going to be a text field. So I'm going to Alt-Tab back to Access. And right here, I'm going to pick short text. And the name of my first field is going to be manufacturer name. And I'm going to widen this column so you can see the name. And you can see the header for this column is called manufacturer name. In Excel, this is a column header, but in Access, this is known as a field. And then I'm just going to go over here and go to short text and name all of the other columns that I have in Excel in this table right here. So I'll do short text and I'll do address, short text city, short text state, short text zip, short text phone, short text email, and short text contact name. And if I alt tab back to my spreadsheet, I can see that my contact comes after the zip code and there's no ID in front here. So if I go back to Access, I can highlight this column and then I can click and drag to the end, and I can highlight this column name and click and drag to right before phone. So now my fields are in the exact same order as my spreadsheet. So if I alt tab back to Excel, I can highlight each of these rows and right click and go to copy. I press Control C, and I can alt tab back to Access, highlight this whole row and hit Control V, and I can just paste those rows in there. And yes, I do want to paste those 9 records. So now I can see these are states, these are zips, these are contact names and phone numbers and emails. So that came in correctly. So just some Access terminology here. This entire group that looks like a spreadsheet is called a table. These column headers up here are called a field, and every field has a data type. And every row is called a record. So we have fields, data types, and records. If I right click on my table and go to Design View, first, because this is a new table, I will be prompted for a table name. I'm just going to call this manufacturers and say OK. So this is a different way of viewing my fields. I can see my manufacturer name, address, city, state, zip, and look over here. These are all short text. That is the data type. It's the kind of data that is allowed to go in that field. But one thing I want you to consider up here is this field called ID. When a new table was created, ID was in the table automatically. And it's also assigned by default a data type called auto number. And if you can look over here and see this key icon, that means this is a primary key for this table. So what is a primary key? Let's right click on here and go back to Datasheet View and look at that ID column. You can see that this is a sequential number inside of this table. But more importantly, this number is unique. So it's possible that I can copy this manufacturer here and paste it down here. And you can have records in a table that are identical in all ways except one, which is the ID column right here. So you can use a primary key under other fields. You could use it under phone number or manufacturer name or anything else that is guaranteed to be unique for that record. Or you can just use an auto number for that. Just remember that it's important to have a way to uniquely identify an individual record. So let's go back to Excel for a minute. And I'm going to look at this second spreadsheet. And I can see on here that I have a part number, a part description, and this manufacturer information all the way to the end is very, very repetitive. So if I were to go to the first manufacturer table and I were to change the phone number for manufacturer A, I would also have to go back into parts and change that phone number every time manufacturer A appears. Or what if my contact name changes? I'm going to have to do that as well. So this is where the strength of the relational database comes in. If I go back to Access, instead of having this entire manufacturer typed in there, I can just have the ID for the manufacturer. And this ID will be a pointer back to this table, pulling out only this manufacturer. So let's see what that looks like. I'd like to create a new table, so I'm going to go up here to Create. And this time I'm going to go to Table Design. And these are my parts. So I'm going to have a part ID, and I'm going to make that an auto number. I'm going to have a part number, and that will be short text. I'm going to have a part description, which will also be short text. And I'm going to have a part manufacturer ID. And this field is going to be a number. So let me Alt Tab back to Excel. If I'm looking here, I have my part number, my part description, and I can substitute all of these fields here for the simple ID of manufacturer A. So let's go back to Access, Alt-Tab, and I have put in the manufacturer ID. And remember that manufacturer ID is going to come from the ID column of the manufacturers. So let's go back to Table 1. And let's just hit this Save icon right here. And let's call this one Parts. And say OK. Now I'm prompted that no primary key has been defined because I haven't defined it yet. But if I say yes here, the auto number will automatically become the primary key. So I'm going to say yes, and you can see that the key icon has gone up there. I can also highlight a row and right-click right here and make that field the primary key. But for now, I'm just going to use the part ID. But it is very possible that your part number is a unique ID, so you could definitely use that field as your primary key as well. So just a little bit more Access terminology. Right here, you have a part manufacturer ID, and this is a pointer back to this table. So anytime you have a field that's a pointer back to another table, that is called a foreign key. So primary key uniquely identifies the record in the table, and foreign key points to the ID of a unique record in another table. If you are liking this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell button to get notified when we release our weekly videos. So another way to see this pictorially is to go up here to Database Tools and click on the Relationships window. And you may see some of the system tables in here. You can ignore those and just scroll down. So what I would like to do is drag in. I did that by clicking on the table and holding down the left mouse button and just dragging it in here. And I want to create a relationship between the ID of the manufacturers, which is the primary key in this table, and the part manufacturer ID, which is the foreign key in this table. And I'm going to be asked to create this relationship, so I'm just going to hit Create. And when I look here, I can see that the field I was saying with the manufacturer ID is going to point back to this table. So for now, I'm going to close that. And I'll always be asked if I want to save changes, just say yes. And I can close up these tables as well. Next, I'm going to go up here to Create, and I'm going to go to Query Design. Let me define what a query is. A query is a way to look at one or more tables where you are limiting the number of columns that you are going to see, or you're limiting the number of rows that you are going to see, or you're limiting both the number of columns and rows that you're going to see. That's for a simple select query. There are tons of other kinds of queries you can do in Access, and we will talk about those in our queries video in a few weeks. But for now, just focus on the select query for now, because that's the simplest kind of query. So in order to create a query, I need to have a table here first. So what would happen if I just dragged my manufacturer's table in? I could limit the fields that I want to see to manufacturer, city, state, and contact name. So what would happen if I looked at this query? I can click this button up here that says View, or I can right-click on this tab right here and go to Datasheet View. Both buttons do the same thing. So if I do that, I can see that I've limited the number of columns that I'm getting from here. But now, what if I only wanted to see my manufacturers that were in Texas? I can go back to Design View, which is this icon up here, or same thing, I can right-click here and go to Design View. And in that case, I'm just going to say I want the state where it says TX. And watch, when I click out of there, it will automatically go into double quotes. So if I right-click here and go to Datasheet View, I am now returning only these certain columns that I picked and only those columns that have the state of Texas. So let's go back to Design View. If I go back to Excel and I look at my parts, I would like to recreate this entire spreadsheet with the manufacturer name and the address, city, state, zip, the contact, the phone, and the email. So if I Alt-Tab back to Access, I can do that now with a query. Notice if I open the parts table, I don't have any part information in there, but most importantly, I don't have any manufacturing information except for the ID. I would like to quickly put some part numbers in here. So I'm going to Alt-Tab back to Excel and just highlight these two columns and hit Control-C, and then go back to Access and highlight these two columns and hit Control V. And I'm going to paste about 30 records and I'll say yes. But notice that my column headers came in here, so I'm just going to delete that record by highlighting it right here on this gray box and hitting delete on my keyboard. And also my part manufacturing ID has not been updated. And that's going to be very important that this is updated correctly. So if I look at my manufacturers, I can see that the valid numbers are 11 of 20. And right now, I'm just going to manually enter some data in for those and just assume that this part number is manufactured by manufacturer 11, as well as this, and this one. And then I'm just going to do 12 for these, 13 for these, and so on. Okay, so I updated all of my data and then some. I'm going to close out of the parts table. And this is where Access gets really fun. Now I'm going to drag the parts table into my query. And you can see that this relationship between the part manufacturing ID foreign key and the manufacturer's table ID primary key has automatically created this line right here. And that's called its relationship. And it did that because we already defined this relationship in the relationships window. Remember up here, database tools, relationships? We did that earlier. So anytime I do that, if there is a relationship between two tables I put in my query, the relationship will automatically be drawn. So I'm going to hit close. And let's pick the fields here so that this query will look exactly like our Excel spreadsheet, except for the manufacturer of the part numbers because I did go and change those. So let's see what we have there. I have part number, description, manufacturer, and then all their contact information. So I'm going to go back to Access, and I'm going to pick part number and description. I have two options, by the way, for getting these fields down into this grid. And let me show you that. Right here I'm missing address. So I can click on the address from this table, keep my left mouse button down, and I can drag it right here. And then I have address, city, state, contact name, and I'm missing phone. So if I double click on phone, that field will go to the very end of my query, and same for email. So I can either click and drag to a certain place on this grid down here, or I can double click and it will go to the end of the grid. So let's see what this query looks like. If I right click and go to datasheet view, you can see I'm still only getting those Texas records. So I'm going to go back to design and take off this criteria for now and run the query again. And you can now see that this has the same number of columns that my Excel spreadsheet has. So let's save that query, and I'm going to call that part manufacturers. And remember, all this manufacturing information is not stored in the parts table. There's only one instance of it in the manufacturers table. So if I go into the manufacturers table and I change this phone number here for manufacturer A to 999, 999, 9999, and look over here to the left for a second, you'll see this pencil. That means that this change is not committed yet. So I'm going to click down here, and I got rid of the pencil, so that means this change has been saved. So if I go back to my query, I can see that my phone number for manufacturer A has been updated in every record that has manufacturer A. And I only had to change that in one place as opposed to several places in Excel. So I'm going to close both of those. So two more quick things I want to show you in Access. One is a data entry form, and it is really easy to make it. So I have the parts table selected, and I'm going to go up here to create, and I'm going to go to form. And you can see that this is the first record inside of my parts table. I have the part number, the part description, and the manufacturer ID. And down here you can see that I have 29 records for that. So if I click these buttons down here, these are called my navigation buttons, I can click through each one of these records in my table. This one with the line will take me to the last record, and this one with the line before it will take me to the first record. And this one here with the star will take me to a new record. But what I really want you to understand is that a form is a way to actually view the data that is inside of a table. So anything I do to the data here will be changed in the table. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to click this view up here so that I'm in form view. And I'm going to go here and change this to have a B at the end of it. And then I'm going to close my parts form, and I'll be asked if I want to save it. Say yes, and I'm going to call this parts form and say OK. So now if I close this and I double click on parts, you will see right here that this record was changed to have a B at the end of it. So for now, I just want you to understand that a form allows you to edit or change data inside of a table. You can also add new records and delete new records in there as well. And finally, I would like to show you what a report is. If I click on manufacturers and I go up here to create and I go to report, you can see that Access has automatically created a report that gives me all of my manufacturer information. And the purpose of a report is to give you a way to print out or export a PDF for all of the data that you have. So in this case, you can see these dotted lines right here. Those are page breaks. And so I would go back into design view of this report, and I would just make some changes to the layout of the report so it can fit on one page. Like you can see, these emails are way too long, and the contact names, these fields don't need to be so big. So you can go back and edit those. But for purposes of discussion today, I just wanted to show you what a report is so that you know it exists within Access. So two final objects we didn't go over are macros and modules. Those are ways of coding Microsoft Access, and we will have some more in-depth lessons on those in the future. But I just want you to know that those things exist. And if you look over here and you see tables, queries, forms, and if I go over here and hit save, I can have manufacturers report and say OK, and you can see that reports have appeared here. One word I want you to know is that each one of these things under tables or under queries or under forms or under reports, these are all called database objects. And Microsoft Access uses database objects. And if you need to refer to one of these objects through code or another means, you can do that as well. So hopefully that gives you a brief introduction to how to use Microsoft Access. We will have many, many more lessons on this, so don't worry if you didn't catch everything. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and we'll get back to you soon. And thanks for watching, and hopefully see you again next time. If you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel and Office, join our Academy online course and access more than 1,000 video training tutorials so that you can advance your level and get the promotions, pay raises, or new jobs. The link to join our Academy online course is in the description.
If you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're really serious about advancing your Microsoft Excel skills so you can stand out from the crowd and get the jobs, promotions and pay rises that you deserve, then click up here and join our Academy online course today.